What is your governing principle in who you quote as influences? For example, I've heard you disparage the necessity of reading Karl Barth due to his shortcomings, but you still quote Dabney without blushing. So what gives?
Well, the first thing is that Barth is not quotable. he's barely readable. So he just orthodoxy and that sort of thing aside, Barth is a turgid German writing dense theology. So even if he were magnificent on the point, it's not quotable. I quote Chesterton all the time because he's pithy and memorable and quotable. And when I quote him, it's because I agree with him, right? And Ambrose Bierce is the same way. Bierce was not a believer, but if you read the Devil's Dictionary, as I have a number of times, some of those definitions I have memorized the first time I read them. They're so they're so sticky, right? And I've noticed an inverse relationship, for example, between how many footnotes Chesterton uses and how many footnotes he's in.
He's in, right.
Right. He people quote him all the time, but he just doing his thing. He had the gift of being memorable, quotable. When I've quoted Dabney, it's usually just a handful of times, right? There are a few quotes that Christians must prepare themselves for the following results. All Bibles, catechisms, and prayers will ultimately be driven out of the schools, which he said in the 1800s. And I quote that sort of thing to say, how could someone see what was coming that far in advance? Chesterton, I quote all over the place. C.S. Lewis, I quote all over the place because they put it well. They say it succinctly.
Well, do you have a rule for like an impulse to put a sort of verbal Mr. Yuck sticker on guys that are very quotable, but who have deplorable lives in one way or another? Do you feel like the need to just give the disclaimer, or do you just purely look for?
I do that with Ambrose Bierce, for example. I'll say Ambrose Bierce, not a Christian or cheerful old reprobate, really nails it on this. I'll put a qualifier there because I don't want people to think that I think Bierce was a godly Christian man. But I think RL Dabney was a godly Christian man, a little irascible at places and whatever. But nothing that I think I need to put a disclaimer on. I'll occasionally put a disclaimer on Chesterton by saying he's my very favorite papist, so that people know that I know that he was a Catholic, and I differ with him on those sorts of things. But I don't feel like you have to distance yourself from everyone you quote. If you said one time Whitman said Walt Whitman said this, or Thoreau said that, or Emerson said a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. That doesn't. I'm not buying into Emerson's whole project. I'm not expecting the people that are listening to me to do that. But it's interesting that cancel culture. There's a cancel culture on the right too, that says anybody who's a friend of a friend of a friend of someone who did something bad, you've got to have all the fine print there, the Surgeon General's warning. I just think that we ought to quote people like grown-ups. And if someone hears you quote them, are you sympathetic with Chesterton's Catholicism? I'd say, oh, no. And that should be sufficient.